Good afternoon. I'm Ernest Frankel, a professor in the Department of Biological Engineering and co-director of the interdisciplinary program in computational and systems biology. Any of you who've walked around Kendall Square over the last few years will have noticed that the landscape is being transformed by an influx of companies in the life sciences and healthcare. And that's no coincidence, because MIT is an engine of innovation in those areas. At MIT, the life sciences and health sciences span many departments, obviously biology, chemistry, physics, and many of the engineering departments, my own biological engineering, chemical, civil, mechanical, materials, and of course, computer science. And we live in an amazing ecosystem where we also have the Broad Institute, the Whitehead, the many hospitals around us, and of course, many venture capitalists. And that's led to a really profusion of companies emerging from MIT. You can see some of them that have biological themes on the slide above us, and you've seen similar slides earlier today. And I think what strikes me about these companies is their diversity. Everything from bionic limbs, better diagnostics, to platforms that accelerate the delivery and discovery of therapeutics. So today we have the opportunity to hear from two leaders in developing entrepreneurial companies that are really, while early, still already having an amazing impact. And I'll ask them each to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies. So let's start with you, Cullen.
All right, happy to be here. Cullen Buie. I'm on the faculty in mechanical engineering and biological engineering. The company that's spun out of my lab is called cheetah. It's a company which is developing a technology that allows you to do scalable gene delivery into human cells for things like CAR T therapy and gene therapies, ex vivo gene therapies. So therapies where they want to take your cells, engineer them, and then give them back to you to serve as a living therapeutic. The beauty of the technology is that it scales from the bench to the clinic. So a challenge in a lot of these fields is that the technologies that you use for discovery don't always scale up to manufacturing, but we have a technology where the same thing that you use at the bench can quickly and easily scale up to what you can use at the clinic. So to put some numbers to it, it can do enough for a human patient in about 1 minute. So you can imagine easily doing this for a large patient population.
Fantastic. Tasuku.
Hi, my name is Tasuku Ketara, and I'm co-founder, head of R&D at Strand Therapeutics. Strand is a next-generation messenger RNA therapeutics company focused on developing cancer drugs. Our drugs are based on messenger RNA. We actually program the mRNA using molecular sensors and switches so that we can express protein in a cell-type specific manner. And what that does is that now you can take really potent proteins like cytokines that might be very good for counteracting cancers, but might be very systemically toxic to the patient. So now we can take that, express it specifically in the tumor so that you can take a difficult to develop mechanism and make it developable. So I developed this technology while I was a postdoc at MIT at the Synthetic Biology Center, together with my business co-founder, Jake Beecraft, who was a student at MIT Biological Engineering, and our scientific co-founders, Ron Weiss at the Synthetic Biology Center, and Daryl Irvine, who was at the Koch Institute at the time.
Fantastic. So I'd like to hear from each of you, what inspired you to start companies? Was there a eureka moment, or was it more like Edison, 1 part inspiration and 99 parts perspiration? Let's start with you, Tasuku.
Yeah, entrepreneurship for me was very serendipitous. So I didn't come to MIT necessarily thinking that I wanted to become an entrepreneur, but I feel like maybe I came at the right time, right place at the right time. A few years before I started my postdoc, Catalin Carrico, Drew Weissman at Penn had developed this technology that showed that you can take messenger RNA and express protein in a very efficient manner. And then Moderna also had just became a company, a startup company, and they're working on the first generation of messenger RNA therapeutics. And so we were, in academia, and while we thought that most people were skeptical, right, about messenger RNA therapeutics at the time, maybe it was only like a 1% chance that it would become, useful for society. But as academic researchers, we can think boldly, and we thought that let's imagine a world in which this messenger RNA became useful for society, and in that world, what would be missing? And what we realized was that the ability to control protein expression precisely was missing for the first generation technologies that companies like Moderna, BioNTech were developing. And so that's why we decided to apply the principles of synthetic biology and program the messenger RNA so that we can express protein in cancer cells specifically or immune cells specifically. And this was more than 10 years ago, way before anyone believed in messenger RNA. And so when we presented this work, right, most people thought it was kind of like sci-fi. And so I think the world wasn't really ready yet for this kind of technology. So we didn't immediately think we were going to spin it off as a company. It wasn't until several years later when we saw that companies like Moderna, BioNTech, they were gaining financial traction, at least thinking about IPOing. That's when we thought that maybe with these resources behind these technologies, maybe now there's a 10% chance of success that mRNA could achieve. And that's when we spun out the company and we started in early 2019.
Thank you, Cullen.
Yeah, I wish I could say that I was 2 years old and I went to start a company on gene delivery technology, and this is a fulfillment of a lifelong dream. That's not the way it happened. It started for us really with a grant from DARPA, so I was actually kind of excited to hear about the new grant opportunities. DARPA kind of took a risk on some technologies from my lab, and this was 2013. I hadn't worked in the space of gene delivery at all. I just had a crazy idea, and they were willing to put some money towards it. And I had a great postdoc at the time, Paulo Garcia, who became my co-founder, and we developed this technology for gene delivery. And around 2016, he would present at conferences, and people would come up to him after the talk, say, "This was awesome, that was amazing. Where do I buy it? Where can I buy this thing?" And we're like, I don't know. We weren't selling it. And it was very much, we started the company to satisfy a market need. We didn't get into the space thinking we're going to start a company and then we're going to be rich and famous. That still hasn't happened yet. We got into it because there was a market need, and we felt it was really clear that for some research at MIT and for some research, the end of your progression is publishing a paper or student's thesis. It was really clear that in this case, the end of this research was in the marketplace. It had to get out there where it could potentially help patients. And I would say there was a lot of serendipity also in our story. We founded the company right around the same time as the engine was being founded. And so we submitted an interest statement saying we were interested in learning more about the engine, and they reached out to us. I'll never forget meeting with Katie Ray. Like, they didn't even have offices at the time. We met in a random conference room at MIT to talk about our technology. And she said, I really want to put gasoline on this and accelerate it forward. And they took a risk on us, and we started the company based on that kind of market pull and the interest from the engine.
A fantastic story. Tasuku, what challenges did you face taking your academic project and turning it into a startup?
Yeah, so the objective of a company is so different, right, from academic research. As a company, we need to be really laser focused on value creation. And so to me, it comes down to company culture and the team. And company culture, it seems like such a nebulous concept, but it goes hand in hand with company strategy, right? So what is it that you choose to do? What is it that you choose not to do? And how do you do it? And so that goes hand in hand with the company's mission. And our mission is to cure cancer. And so every day we ask our employees, right, what is it that you're doing that specifically that creates value towards that goal and mission of curing cancer? And if it doesn't really contribute to that, let's drop it and then really focus on the activities that lead to value creation. And then on the, just setting the company culture and the strategy isn't enough, right? The team needs to execute on that. And so from a team perspective, of course you need the really talented people, the intelligent people, but that's not enough, right? You really need grit. So as a startup, right, you're facing crises all the time, right? And it's so easy to give up. So you need not just intelligence, but that grit to hang in there and figure out how to solve these problems when they come. But that isn't enough either. You need to be a real team player, right? Because drug development is a team sport. And so, in the early days, we brought in a lot of talented research scientists, a lot coming from MIT as well. And once we were successful with the drug discovery phase of the company, then it was time to really bring in a lot of industry experienced folks that can work on the development. Our SVP, has decades of experience in industry developing gene therapies, Prashant Nambiar. And then we also brought in some folks that can really manufacture the drug, right? That's super important, or else your drug isn't going to be successful. So Joel Barberio is our Vice President of Technical Operations that is really experienced with lipid nanoparticles, messenger RNA drug development. So yeah, with that, now we're a clinical stage company, and I think we're proving out our concept of taking these really potent mechanisms and curing cancer patients.
Colin, as a professor, as an academic, do you encourage your students to do entrepreneurship? And if so, what message do you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. These days, you almost don't need to encourage them. Like, probably half the students that come to you are already interested in it. So I actually spend a lot of time discouraging students, mainly by. I think there are two poor reasons to want to start a company, and then I'll give a good one. The two bad ones that you kind of see, unfortunately, being an entrepreneur has kind of become a bit glamorized. And you can kind of tell that there are some that are interested in being an entrepreneur because it's going to sound really cool to tell their friends they're raising money. That's a terrible reason to be an entrepreneur. There's a second one, and you see this a lot, and it's a hard one, but people get really excited about their technology. They love their science. They love their technology so much. They just think everyone else in the world is going to love it. And the truth is that the world doesn't care about your technology. They care about what it can do. They care about the solution. And so that gets me to the good reason is you need a good why. You need a good, who are you going to help? Whose life is going to change by the success of your technology or of your company? If you have a compelling why, that's a good reason to be an entrepreneur, because that's the thing that's going to keep you going those late nights, those long days when you're raising money, which you'll always be raising money. That's the thing that's going to keep you going. So I usually tell students, like, find a good why. Find a good problem. That's the thing that you want to be motivated by, not by the technology. The technology's nice. Technology is nice to get a degree, but not nice for starting a company.
That's a wonderful lesson for our students here. Tasuku, I understand that you took a bit of a detour between your time at MIT and starting Strand. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it and how it may have influenced your path?
Yeah, and a lot of this was really serendipitous, right? It wasn't like this was my grand plan in life, but so I met my wife while I was here at MIT, and she was a visiting student from Belgium. And so after I finished my postdoc so that I can be with her, I moved to Europe. And when I moved to Europe, I decided that, getting outside of the MIT environment, it's so hard, right? You kind of get spoiled with like the resources that you have here. And I thought maybe I'll try something else. And I joined an asset management company, a biotech investment fund in Brussels. And so I was a so-called buy-side analyst, and so we had billions of dollars in investor money invested in public biotech and pharma companies. We had more than 100 companies in our portfolio, and my job as an analyst was to follow, right, obsessively every single move that these public biotech and pharma companies make. And so I analyzed, platform technologies, the pipeline drugs, right, and all the diseases that are being, pursued by the biotech and pharma companies. And so, I didn't necessarily really love that job per se, but it was so educational in learning about what people are doing in the biopharma space. And it's kind of Cullen mentioned, right? So that helped us think about what are the unmet medical needs that this next generation messenger RNA technology can address. And that led us to focusing on cancer and immuno-oncology using Strand's messenger RNA technology.
Oh, wonderful. Colin, maybe this is the last question, given how much time we have. Are there any lessons that you learned that you would give advice that you'd give to your former self when you were just starting out?
Yeah, I'd probably give myself the advice I just gave all of you, which is don't forget your why. I think as you get into it, you can start getting distracted by all kinds of things which seem like success or seem like milestones along the way. Hiring people, finding new space, raising money, finding customers. Those things are all great, but don't forget the core thing that motivated you to get into it in the beginning. Who are think of the faces of the people that are going to be saved and helped by what you're doing, and maybe try to keep a good connection with them. It can be, in the technology that we were working on, it's a gene delivery technology, and so we interact more with customers who then will interact with patients, and so you can feel a little bit removed, and early on, I think it might have been helpful to just continue to remember why you're doing it and who you're doing it for.
Oh, that's a great message to end on. So I want to thank you both for a really fascinating conversation. I think what came out to me in these conversations with you is really that exemplifies what's really best about MIT, people working across disciplines, really focused on addressing some of the really challenging problems for society, especially in healthcare. And let's give them a big round of applause.